Hello. So I'm here with Josh. Is it Simons or Simmons? I
It
assume
is. It
Simons.
is Simon's. You got it right on the nose.
All right. And you've got an exciting sort of tabletop role-playing game company creation project, which you're going to explain better than I will. So I will let you go ahead there.
Yeah. So, hey, my name is Josh. I've been in the tabletop games industry since 2019. And myself and my business partner, V Muse or Muse, who many folks know in the tabletop space, have started together a tabletop game publishing company called Broken Door Entertainment. And we're real excited about it. We've just started, posting little teases about what we're working on and the things that, we're most excited about. And so, it's been a long process getting to this moment where we were able to announce it and say, hey, it's a thing, it's real. People can actually come and, follow us online and check out our website. And so we're very excited. And then, of course, you reached out and said, hey, let's talk about it. And here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw your sort of note here. You were noting about, the company name being, we've decided to kick the door down because of the game industry's usual nonsense. And the usual nonsense is kind of getting to be a big list because I've done videos about like the OGL debacle and stuff like that. So what is sort of your goal with all of this? What is the purpose of your company?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of our stated purpose. There's kind of our secret hopes and dreams purpose, and then there's all the things that we come across along the way that are very exciting too, sort of purpose. And I'll talk very loosely. I think for both of us, but for me in particular, I was laid off earlier this year. I had, enjoyed a very fun job at a tabletop game company, and I still love them and still have a great relationship with them. But things being what they were, they needed to do a round of layoffs, and I got caught in that. So when we talk about, nonsense, that's a big part of, the financing going through traditional investors and capital equity and all these things that make it a little bit more business-like than just, hey, let's sit down and tell some really cool stories together. And so after this layoff a few months ago, I had at that point had a game that I was mostly done with. It was probably 75-80% of the way, to being final manuscript ready, or at least, first draft ready at bare minimum. And so, V and I had gotten to talking, because we were both like, man, it'd be really cool to do something ourselves, right? Like, I feel like it's very common for folks in the tabletop, space to be like, oh man, if I just had, enough money, I would start my own company and hire all my friends to, come and publish all these games because we've got all these good ideas. We just, can't afford to do it. And so, V and I put our heads together and came up with a plan to, get the company started and, kind of get the ball rolling ourselves, and then use a Kickstarter to get this first game out the door. And so that's exactly what we've done, and it's been a very exciting thing so far. As far as I'd say like bigger picture goals, I will only speak for myself. I don't want to assume that I know V's heart, but I certainly am excited about the idea to tell stories that maybe wouldn't otherwise get told. And I think there's a little bit of that you can see in Paragons, what we're doing this first game, which is really inspired by the classic, superhero cartoons that I loved as a kid. I watched a lot of Teen Titans. I watched a lot of like Batman, the animated series. I watched a lot of just growing up, Saturday morning cartoons was a thing in my house. And so I was really, as I was thinking about this game in my very early concept phase. I was like, man, like there's something powerful about animation as a medium. Of course, I had just rewatched not Into the Spider-Verse, but Across the Spider-Verse, the recent Spider-Man animated movie, and it was great. And so I was like, oh, there's something here. There's something about that magic that animation does really well, and I wonder if I could capture that feeling as a tabletop game mechanic. And so spent a lot of time working on that from a mechanics perspective. And we can dig into mechanics in a minute, but that was something that was near and dear to my heart that, someone else may have, come up with a great idea for it. I know there are plenty of great tabletop games that do see superheroes or that have that, kind of rules light, fast-paced type of gameplay. But I think we've really kind of found this perfect balance in terms of, a little bit of crunchy rules, but it's super easy to pick up, super easy to learn. That's been like the key piece of feedback from every playtest session we've done so far. And I've done like 15 or 20 of them at this point, is, man, this was so fast to pick up that in a 2-hour session, we learned how to make characters, we made characters, and then we still played the game for an hour and a half.
And I think that there's a lot less patience in the tabletop sphere for some of the games that I grew up on. Like, if you're sitting there going, okay, I love Shadowrun. It's a great game to play. But when you're telling new players, okay, here's a spreadsheet you're going to want to use to build your character to adjust points, the number of times new players like glaze out. So yeah. I'm always happy every time I hear a designer say, I'm looking for something that's easy to get into, because that's kind of the market these days. That's the world.
Yeah, we've tried to be really, friendly to people who have any kind of video game familiarity, or people, a lot of folks in the tabletop space, they like 5e right now. So, we try to frame things in a way that will make sense to someone who's coming from, any kind of, gaming background, really. But even as we introduce new mechanics, we try to really be very simple. Here's how this works. And that's what I think the dice pool, style of game does really well, is it's not a question of, okay, wait, what die do I roll for this? How do these mechanics interact? It's, okay, I need 3 dice and 2 dice. I'm rolling 5 dice. Great.
Yep.
And you can just go. And it gets you into play a lot faster, because as a GM, I can also just like, okay, you're rolling 6 dice. Here's how you know where that number comes from. Have at it.
And people do love rolling lots of dice.
It's so satisfying. And we account for that too in our system. A very early draft of it used about half as many dice as we currently do. And the key thing, I was like, man, what if I could actually like let people like have that fistful of dice and roll them everywhere? And so, we've got this idea of, what's fun and what's satisfying, and are really trying to lean into that as much as we can, with our game design choices.
And I mean, I think that that's kind of an important thing, the satisfaction element. So Paragon is superheroes, and you already mentioned animated style, which is interesting because superheroes is such a huge field, right? You've got lighthearted. I mean, Saturday morning cartoons tends to be fairly lighthearted, although they dip their feet in some darker things, but maybe not quite as much as, say, Watchmen or The Boys. Which would be a different feel.
Sorry, I'll let you finish the question.
I was just going to say, so thematically, whereabouts do you land on all of these things?
I have kind of 2 conflicting philosophies there, actually. And the first is, I'm making a set of rules. You can tell whatever kind of story you want with it. But I think, our starting point is, this is intended to be, if not family friendly, PG-13 style gameplay. I think that's pretty accessible to most audiences. That being said, you can take our game and you can run something like The Boys or Invincible and really amp up the gore and amp up the gritty, real world, everything sucks vibes, and like, go for it. You can totally do that. We don't necessarily provide like the setting and flavor for that particular style of gameplay, but tabletop gamers are so good at taking something and tweaking it to fit what they want to do at their table that I'm not concerned about that. So we're kind of starting with more, I'll say, friendly to as many different types of players as possible. But we're also not like writing a game for kids. This is intended to be for adults who maybe have a little bit of nostalgia towards Saturday morning cartoons. Maybe they just really love anime or some of the recent superhero cartoons, like X-Men '97 recently was just really well done. And so maybe they seen something like that recently and just like, oh, I really want to like dig my teeth into that type of world in a tabletop setting.
How do you where does it land on sort of, I guess, a dichotomy of like toolbox games? And what I mean by that is that there are games like, I guess GURPS would be one of the ultimate toolbox games. It's a rule set that you can slap any sort of theme on, all the way up to some games are very, very purpose driven. I mean, the underlying rule set for something like Blades in the Dark, you can adapt into different things, but they've had to adapt it. Like if you want to play it as something else, you pretty much need another rule book for it. So where in that, because you mentioned that flexibility, so whereabouts do you figure this will land?
Yeah, I think so. Paragons itself is going to be fairly, leaned into, hey, this is a superhero game. This is what we're all about. But I think the underlying system, has a lot of flexibility. And what we'd like to do is publish, an SRD for folks to go and use it and make their own stuff using the same underlying system. And so we'll, strip it of some of its superhero flavor and say, hey, here's what it looks like in Paragons, but obviously, like if you wanted to change it from archetypes to classes or archetypes to jobs or something like that, you could easily do that, and take the bones of the system, which I think are really they could support a lot of different types of games, and then do whatever you want with it, whether that's just write a grittier version of the Paragons world or something completely far-fetched like unicorns in space or something.
And that's, I guess, my next question is, have you guys thought anything about sort of licensing? Because this is something I've talked about a whole bunch on my channel. There's the OGL, there's the Orc. I'm working on the Elf, which I would love to put you on the spot and say, hey, will you commit to the Elf? But you should not, because it's not finished yet. So just in terms of like opening things up to allow third party and content creation and publishing. Like I saw that you worked with Kobold Press in the past, and they've been big users of like the OGL and so forth. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, I've got plenty of experience in the third party 5e publishing space. We haven't committed to a specific license at this point. I don't think we would go to the OGL, just because it seems like trends in the industry are leading away from it. That's a bridge that I expect to cross when we're ready to cross it. But loosely, I'm not interested in having people need to pay me to use it or anything like that. I want it to be freely available. I think it makes sense to have something where they give us credit for developing the game system and then call it a day, because I think ultimately that's the most like in tune with the spirit of tabletop role-playing games. Like just the community thing is, we love telling stories together. We love, that idea of someone taking something that's really meaningful to them and putting their own twist on it. So I wouldn't want to limit it in a way where it's paywalled, but the specifics, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If the elf license is written at that point, I'm happy to give it a look and see, but maybe we do something with Orc. Maybe we, lean a little more Creative Commons. Hard to say.
And in terms of, you've started a company, is this sort of your primary gig at this point? And what are the main sort of hurdles and obstacles that you're running into starting a tabletop company?
Yeah. So this is not my primary gig right now. To be completely transparent, I don't expect to take a paycheck from Broken Door for at least the first year, probably 2 years. Just realistically, there's a lot of costs that go into getting the company up and running, and the first product needs to be making money in order for us to have enough money to make the second product, at which point we might have enough income where I can go, oh, nice, I'll write myself a check for $500. Good job. That's a couple of nice dinners. But
I think that a lot of people in the tabletop role-playing sphere fail because they think that they're going to be able to buy themselves a pizza even in like the first year. And so that's always a good thing, like realistic goals.
Yeah. Since being laid off, I have been doing a lot of freelance marketing and community work. That's kind of what my background is as a community manager and digital marketer. So that's what I'm doing right now to pay the bills while I look for maybe something a little bit more stable on that front. So if you know any game publishers who are hiring, let me know. But I expect that this will probably remain a kind of part-time thing for the foreseeable future. We're committed to paying all of our contractors really well. And so, that's where a lot of our operating budget is going right now, is making sure that the contractors who are doing our artwork or, writing the bits that, need a more, culturally in tune lens for this specific cultural consultant or that specific cultural consultant. That's where a lot of our budget is going. Obviously editing, layout, there's all kinds of stuff that goes into making a game. It's expensive, and for good reason, because it's a challenging and complicated process, but it's a really rewarding one. So yeah,
people don't realize just how much money is spent on a game before before $1 is collected.
Yeah.
And that, I guess that gets us to the next question I was going to ask, which I was like, I hope this is not going to be too much of a tough question. It sounds like there's no plans to have like AI art in the game or anything like that.
No, we are very firmly committed to hiring humans to make human art. My stance on all of these new technologies that are I feel like constantly popping up is, hey, maybe it sounds cool in concept, but until I can see it be done very well, very ethically, without any kind of concerns, I have no interest in incorporating something that's a huge question mark into something that I'm doing. So, maybe one day I saw, there's, I think, this viral tweet going around recently that was like, I'd really like AI to do my laundry for me so I can go make art. And that's, ultimately, I think that's probably the best use. And that's, until it can do my laundry for me so that I can go write games, we probably won't use it.
I'm sort of, I guess, less of a fundamentalist on sort of AI art than some people. I think it has uses, but I don't like the idea of it replacing artists, especially on projects like this, like superhero art. Like as a genre, it exists because there were artists and so forth. And I don't like when it's replacing, I guess, paid uses. So I appreciate that you're going, we're not doing that. We're not, this will be a not that kind of project. I'm less strict on it when people are like, I'm using it as a placeholder for something just so that I can, see what my book will look like or whatever else. But no, I appreciate the heck out of that. And I think I guess the other question, no AI text either, I assume.
No. I would say probably 85% of the final text you'll read in the book was written by me. And then anything that, isn't written by me is written by, another one of our contributors. And then all of it is edited by someone who's not me to take all of my, garbage and really clean it up and make it, look and sound a lot better than if I'd actually written it.
I think that's pretty important, because if you try to do your own editing, you could do a certain amount, but there gets to be a point where you're like, I love this turn of phrase, and somebody else looking at it will go, yeah, I get that, but no.
Yeah. No, we've been very intentional about, making sure that we are doing things in a way to deliver as high a quality of product as possible. And I'm real excited about how it's shaping up. I was getting some work in over the weekend and wrote a couple of little finishing touches to mechanics that have been close to done for a while now. And just seeing things come together is just so thrilling. And then my editor goes through and she's like, okay, we're going to tweak this. We're going to tweak this. We're going to tweak this. I'm like, oh, you're right. That did need some improvement. You're right. I repeated a couple of words there that I shouldn't have. That's so redundant. Good catch.
Oh, I mean, the number of people who have written RPG books where it's like, I'm sure this rules explanation makes perfect sense if you already know how it works, is not a small list.
Yeah.
You mentioned, mechanics as like dice pool mechanics. Can you give us sort of an overview of what the game looks like, mechanically?
Yeah, absolutely. We take inspiration from a couple of different sources, and part of that just has to do with the nature of dice pool mechanics. There are a couple of games that do it really well, and when I think of games that are known for dice pools, I think of the World of Darkness games. They do a very good job, taking that as a very large category, and I think they have a very good example of, here's a dice pool game done well. I think that sometimes the rules descriptions,
this is the closest one I could grab.
Hey, I've played Mage. It's a good time. I think sometimes the rules descriptions, can be a little tricky to get through because they're often couched in so much lore, and so we've tried to very succinctly say, here are the mechanics. This is all you need to get started. But I think they do a good job in terms of implementing mechanics. Another big inspiration is the Year Zero engine from Free League. They have written just some beautiful game systems that really complement the tone and the story that you're telling at the table. Alien in particular is an example where they have stress dice that really beautifully capture that heightened feeling that you get from watching a horror movie or being in a particularly frightening scenario. And so
horror, I think, is the toughest genre to capture in a game.
Yeah. So, I took a good hard look at the Year Zero engine and really love a couple of ways that they implement things. And so have, taken what I think are the best parts of that system and, implement it with a couple of other things. Like I pull a little bit of inspiration from some of the Powered by the Apocalypse games. I want, the feeling to this game to, have a little bit of crunch, and that the numbers are a little more meaningful. And, it's there's some more, I would say, tangible examples of what a stat is, as opposed to, relying so heavily on moves as a system. But I do take the idea of moves as some examples for what you could do, in a turn. And I think that's a very helpful influence to kind of inform the more narrative components of the system. But then, I also I like the idea of hero points from Pathfinder, and said, hey, that's a really cool concept where we can reward players for doing cool stuff. Let's implement that. And so, we have I call them cool points. I didn't want to call them hero points, but they're cool points. And superheroes are cool. And so when you want to have a cool superhero moment, you spend a cool point and you do something cool. and just kind of leaning into the tone and the flavor of superheroes with all these awesome powers, flying through the sky, fighting bad guys, and have some of that like epic, storytelling feel to the mechanics is a lot of fun.
And I like the idea of a somewhat more lighthearted game. It feels like there's a lot of grit out there. And I mean, I tend to run fairly gritty games, but I also like the idea of occasionally being able to put that aside and just do something something silly. Like, it's been a long time since I played anything that had the feeling of like Paranoia as a silly game, or I guess even like a lighthearted superhero games can be pretty lighthearted. They can. My wife and I were watching The Tick,
Okay.
and from 2012, and going, this is actually pretty good as a, like, it's a parody of superheroes, but it's also in a lot of ways some of the better superhero stuff because it's fun, right? You've got people who sometimes look like they're having fun, which I think it's easy to lose. Like, it's easy to lose that sense of like wonder in all of these things. So I like the concept. I appreciate that. What are your biggest challenges right now? What are the sort of obstacles that you're trying to, like, I guess if this project blows up, what'll be the reason?
Well, I sure hope it doesn't. I think, there are challenges that, it's not a matter of blowing up. It's just a matter of like, how quickly do we get past this? I'd love to launch our Kickstarter campaign in the fall. Just because life gets busy once you get into the holiday season, and I feel like it'd be really easy to lose track of a crowdfunding campaign amidst holiday travel and getting together with family and whatever else that folks have planned for the holidays. So we have a very loose deadline of like, hey, we want to get this out the door, at a certain time. At least be ready to crowdfund, and I'd like to have a kind of free playtest / quick start guide for folks to check out, alongside that. So that way you can actually play the game and go, oh, this is fun. Now I'm going to back it, as opposed to, that sounds cool in concept. Who knows? So we really want to have that proof of concept there for folks to play with. And so like, I don't think it'll blow up if we don't get it done, as soon as we'd like. But that's like the big focus right now. We could probably, put a more unpolished playtest out if we had to. But, I want it to have a full editing pass and have a little bit of artwork. And that way people, when they see it, they go, yeah, okay. I feel the game and what it's trying to, accomplish when I check this out. And that inspires me to go and back the Kickstarter.
That's a terrifying thing. I've got a couple of projects I might eventually want to try a Kickstarter with, and just the concept scares the heck out of me.
It's daunting. I think like any big project, cutting it down into small bite-sized pieces is really been very helpful to go, okay, well, I don't need to write a whole game. I just need to write this one section. And, I don't need to edit the whole thing. I just need to go through my revisions in this one section. And, little by little, piece by piece, we're getting there. But yeah, it certainly feels daunting when you think about how many words need to be done and how many art pieces do we need and how much am I spending on all of this? Baby steps. We're getting there.
And you mentioned a little bit about this. What I see a big wall of game books on your shelf. What are your some of your favorite games?
Yeah. Wow. Recently, I have been really focused on Paragons, so I haven't had as much time to play as I would like. But some of my personal favorites, there's a few. I have played a lot of D&D in my day. I feel like
everyone has.
I feel like the last few years I've played a lot less D&D, and I've experimented with a lot of other systems. But D&D was certainly, I think, the first tabletop role-playing game that really was like, oh, solidified. Yeah, I love this hobby. Although I started as a wargamer. For the record, I started as a war gamer, and then someone was like, "Hey, you really like this stuff? You should come play D&D." And I said, "Nah, that sounds too nerdy for me." And then a couple years went by, and eventually I started playing. But recently I really liked Candela Obscura, that the Critical Role team put out last year. And I think they do some really cool things, in that design space, playing with themes of horror and the supernatural, which was a lot of fun. I already, listed the World of Darkness games and the Year Zero engine as inspirations. 2 years ago, I ran a Mutant Year Zero campaign that was a lot of fun. And got to kind of lean into the post-apocalyptic setting for a little while. And I'm not like the grittiest GM in general. I tend to like to make sure there are moments of levity and give everyone opportunities to feel like the hero of the story, even if it's a story where at the end everybody dies. I like to give those fun moments. But I've spent a lot of time with Pathfinder Second Edition recently. I've spent a little bit of time with the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, which, as another superhero adaptation, I think does a really good job of giving you a super crunchy, superhero game. I think Matt Forbeck and the team over there did a great job on it. But I'm also using it as a point of reference to be like, okay, great. They do this really well, but that is not what I want my game to be, because I want it to be a lot more like flexible and fast paced. And,
every good game has stuff that it's stealing.
Yeah.
And stuff that it's working away from. And that, like, those decisions are always, it's always interesting when you sort of pick apart a game and see where they're making those choices. So I'll admit I'm excited because I've got I played a bunch of things. I've got a whole bunch of like Mutants and Masterminds. I keep dabbling with the idea of running a Mutants and Masterminds game, but maybe I'll wait and see what comes out with this and run an idea with that. So like the idea I've got, I can hold off and just be like, all right, let's try this out sometime in the future. So
hey, you're certainly welcome to. As we update our playtest documents, if you want to take an early sneak peek, I can probably make that happen too. But
I won't say no. I'm always eager to see. I am, as I said, a massive geek. I just love all of this stuff, and I love the decisions that you see made under the hood and how they work. So I'm looking forward to sort of, the concept here, because I think of all things, superhero really does need a little bit more of that flexibility. I don't know why there's so many heavy, hard crunch superhero games, which is weird.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why is, if I were to start speculating here, I think part of the reason why some of the slightly more, narrative-oriented game systems do a good job with superheroes is because ultimately I think superhero stories are like there's the mechanics and the powers and how everything works, and there are folks who really love to dig into that. But I think more than anything else, like they're stories about like people with this kind of destiny set in front of them, and there's something that it really, like, I think as people we gravitate towards those stories because like they give us hope for a better world, and they, I think, inspire us also to be better versions of ourselves. But there's so much like flexibility in something, especially that's like set in a more modern setting. Like most superhero games tend to be like, oh, it's the modern day, except there's people who can lift cars and people who can fly and people who can punch you so hard that you fall through the earth. And like that's just a given for every day. And they, I think, break the rules of the world in ways that a traditional high fantasy tabletop game doesn't, because sure, you might have a barbarian with maxed out strength and a magic weapon, but like you're not going to punch anybody through the crust of the earth. Whereas like you think about like Superman, or I've been watching Invincible recently, like they really just like, oh, human, there's a concrete wall. There's no longer a concrete wall anymore, you know, and that requires a little bit of suspension of disbelief that maybe a
Oh,
normal world doesn't have.
oh, absolutely. Just in terms of things like, what does the concept of like military aggression look like in a superheroes game? Like you've got, Watchmen sort of answers that
Mm,
with, Dr. Manhattan essentially being a nuclear weapon.
yeah,
Um, and you've got other places where it's you can have like low superhero stuff where it's you've got superheroes who are basically like their own special squads and so
yeah,
forth, but in the average universe a lot of things become very hard. I guess the biggest sort of suspension of disbelief is just that the world continues on as it was.
mm,
um, if
yeah,
you've got a guy who can create limitless energy, why is he not being paid to like be the power grid? Like
yeah.
just
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely a great point. And I think that's one of the interesting questions. As I talked with some of the folks who are doing some of the setting development with me, I gave them a list of questions like these are the things that I really want to ask in this game, and one of them is, what does it mean to be a human in a world where there have always been people with superpowers? Like how does that change our understanding of ourselves and how we fit in the universe? And maybe we have a great answer for it, and maybe we don't. But I think it's really interesting to think about. Well, how would the world be different, if there were superheroes? Not just to like stop wars and help innocent people from natural disasters, but also like you mentioned, like there are a lot of things that we experience on a day-to-day basis that could probably be completely mitigated, right? Like if there was a superhero who could create infinite power, powering the power grid, one, they would make a lot of money, and two, power would be practically free. We wouldn't be paying hundreds of dollars for energy bills. And
and what's
that's a
our
really
criminal
interesting
just
idea.
like I do criminal law. What's our criminal justice system look like if we have telepaths or people who can, tell the
Yeah,
truth, like determine truth from lies or see back in time? Like, hey, who committed this murder? Bob, right? Like, here's a
yeah,
picture of them.
yeah,
Um, that kind of thing is just, I mean, I guess the fundamental question that superhero stuff always deals with is really two things. As you mentioned, what does it mean to be a person in the world where there's superheroes? And the other one is just the thing of like, what does it mean to suddenly have this, happen to you where you've got these powers, and how do you
mm,
deal with that?
yeah,
Um, I think that's the reason why we see so many movies about the superhero origin story and far fewer movies about like, okay, here's like this guy's 600th adventure, as opposed to like how they got their powers and what they do about it.
yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, there's a really interesting, I think, narrative space there, where you talk about like finding yourself and finding who you were always meant to be, or what is your destiny, or that kind of thing. And so so many superhero stories get there. And what I love about tabletop games, and what I'm really excited to provide with Paragons, is a space for people to explore that, not just in the game world, but also like a lot of the times we play tabletop games and we learn things about ourselves and through our characters. And I'm excited for hopefully people to play a game of Paragons and go, oh wow, like I feel inspired to like go and like make this change, or go and like you know volunteer at my local food shelter, or whatever it might be. Like I hope that people play our game and they have a great time, but then they go, wow, like I learned something about myself, and like I'd like to go make the world a better place, because that's actually like really important, and really important to me. And I've discovered this about myself by playing this game, where I had a character who dressed up in tights and flew around the world.
And I guess you kind of grabbed my next question, which was going to be, what do you hope people get out of this game? And I'm thrilled that you did, because that was a great answer. Because it's different vibes from different games for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think, on the one hand, like I said a little bit earlier, superheroes inspire us, and those stories, I think, inspire us to be, better versions of ourselves. I during the whole, Marvel movie marathon, I feel like over the last, decade, where there's been all these movies coming out, I loved going and seeing those movies in theaters, because I would walk out afterwards. I'm like, man, like I long for a world where it feels like people with strong values could actually like change, the shape of the future. That would be so nice if we had agency in our own lives. That'd be so cool. And so, I think there's a component where, I want to give people that same feeling, that same, desire to go, make a difference. But also, I think we're in a really interesting, political climate right now, social climate right now. And I think stories about people who, discover themselves, or who, finally, become who they've always felt like they were different, and they finally realize, who they were always meant to be. I think there's a lot of power to those types of stories. And then again, yes, the idea of, like, making the world a better place, and having agency. I hope people, play this game, and it gives them hope for the future of the world, because, they say, oh, I've imagined, as part of this game world, what a better future could look like. And now that I've got an idea of what that looks like, I could actually try to make that happen in my life. I could imagine a better future, and then I could make it better myself. Uh, and it feels silly when I say it like that, but I think sometimes games really do inspire us. And I'd love for Paragons to play a small role in someone's, journey to taking action in their life that makes the world a better place.
I mean, at the end of the day, we don't have superpowers, but we do have the ability to make decisions that
Yeah.
will actually matter to people. And you know, heroism on the average day-to-day basis is very different than heroism, in the movies, but it matters a lot more. And I do think these stories are important for how they inspire us, and how they lead us to do different things and maybe be better people. Because especially when we've got a world right now which is, complicated and difficult, it's good to have models for, like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Would you step up? Like, would you stand up? Would you do things on this? So
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. And as much as I love the sort of gritty games and all of that, I also really like that there's a place for, ultimately, I think there's a lot of hope in the superhero story, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's, imagine people who've been given all of this power, and what do they decide to do with it? Well, they decide to go out and help people and right wrongs and so forth. When, I mean, realistically, the average person, if you gave them the power to, fly and all of this, they would probably appear on some reality shows and start a YouTube channel and get celebrity, and then move into a big house, and you know,
Probably be a
I
really
mean,
good stunt person too.
yeah, it'd be like, okay, so I'm going to be on the next Alec Baldwin movie, and nobody's going to have to worry about whether or not the gun
Oh,
is unloaded, because
oh boy. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be covering that on my other channel. So
Oh,
it's
very interesting. Yeah, just kind of going on the theme of, the theme of hope. There's a really great quote, and I think it's G.K. Chesterton, and I'm not confusing it with someone else. But he's got a really great line that says, fairy tales don't tell children that dragons exist. They tell them that they can be killed, or they can be beaten. And I think that's more than anything else. Maybe that's what we're striving for.
Yeah, I sort of look at them. Sometimes these games can be, I guess I describe them as like a fire drill.
Mm.
Um, there's no fire. Nobody actually thinks there's a fire when you're having a fire drill. Usually, it's just everybody sort of practices getting out of the building in an orderly fashion. It's kind of a what would you do if there was a fire
Yeah.
kind of situation there. So I think that sometimes it can be good to just kind of play out these scenarios of like, what if, and sort of come to better decisions or better ways of thinking, or just think about how you might react or what you might want to do. And it's I'm a big fan of the genre, I guess, as a
Mm.
place to play around with that kind of
Mm.
idea. So
Yeah.
all right, I'm just trying to sort of think of, I feel like I'm missing some questions that I should be asking, but it's it's a giant sort of sphere of things. Who do you have, like, artists picked out? Are there sort of specific artists you're running with at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a core team that has started work on pieces. You can see one piece by Dakota Curry on our website, and we're getting more work from him. We've got a couple other artists who are on our team. We haven't shared any other artwork yet. We'll start, I think, trickling that stuff out, between now and the Kickstarter launch. I want to save some things to be like, and by the way, it's the Kickstarter launch. Here's this cool piece, and not like show everything beforehand. And
You got
I'd
you
even
got to
like to
sort of
save a
dribble
couple
it
for the
out
book
to
too. But yeah, we'll talk more about who all we're working with, between now and then, and we'll talk about so much more, I'm sure. So, a lot of that will be happening on our social media channels, which, if folks go to the website, brokendoor.shop, you can find links to all of our social
that'll be
media
linked.
platforms. Brilliant. So, that's probably the easiest way to keep up with that stuff. But, the other thing we're asking is if folks are interested, sign up for our email newsletter. I won't spam you, I promise, but we just want to tell you, hey, it's time for the Kickstarter pre-launch page. Go check it out. Hey, the Kickstarter is live. If you haven't, signed up for the pre-launch page yet, go check it out. Hey, you have 24 hours left to back the Kickstarter. If you're interested, now's the time. Really, I'm not kidding. And so, that kind of thing. And then, when we get to the next thing, we'll have, the next thing with email updates. But, that's just a way for us to tell you what's happening. Social media sometimes isn't reliable. In serving the posts that you want to see regularly, and so that's a way to make sure you don't miss any updates from us.
Awesome. And it sounds like the best way to help support the project, if you're listening to this and you're going, that sounds like something I'm interested in, is share the stuff around, make sure other people have seen it, and I'm excited. So hopefully other people are as well, because it looks like a really interesting project. And as much as there's a few games in the superhero space, I feel like it's still one that hasn't quite been, I guess, mined out. There's still a lot of room for new ideas and new development, because it's one that I guess is less flooded than, say, like fantasy games, and less occupied by a monolith. I mean,
Yeah.
going up against D&D is kind of a tough spot if you're making like a fantasy game. So this is a real a place that could use more love. So good to see it.
Well, we're certainly excited about it. We definitely, when thinking about what we wanted to start with, it made sense to do something that was kind of uniquely our own, kind of outside of the high fantasy genre. Got nothing against it. We'll probably do stuff in the fantasy realm, maybe even that's compatible with 5th edition at some point. But we really wanted to start with something that was kind of going to be ours, and we didn't have to worry about competing with other people, or trying to say, hey, we're doing this thing, but it's ours and not D&D. And so we really we wanted to focus on something that would give us some room to run. And what comes next, we'll see. But very excited to play around in the superhero genre here for this first one.
Well, I'm excited too. So, guys, check them out. That was brokendoor.shop, if I've got that correct.
Yep.
Excellent. I was like, did I did I get that wrong? I hope not. So,
No, you got
check
it.
them out, and keep following, because there's more to come. And I should also note, this is not your first rodeo. You've got background with Kobold Press, etc. So we're talking about somebody who knows a bit about what it is involved in terms of getting something from beginning to end, and which also is like, hey, we're not talking not as likely to be like a project that fizzles out. This is somebody who knows how to get things where they are. So
yeah, V and I have both in this space for a long time. We both love it. We both live it and breathe it. And this is really just an opportunity for us to, going back to the name, kick the door down and say, okay, we're going to do this ourselves, and we're going to do this in a way that we know that it can be done. We just want to make sure that it's done right, and that's why we're doing it ourselves instead of waiting for someone else to do it.
Awesome. Well, I am, as I said, super excited. So I will, I guess we'll wrap it up here, and I look forward to seeing what you do, and possibly future conversations as things develop. So
great. Thank you so much.